During a family dinner, my son-in-law, Brian, let out a loud laugh. The way he looked at me, I could tell he was asking what it was like to be a loser. Everyone at the table chuckled except me. I simply smiled, asking him how it felt to know that the supposed loser wouldn't be paying his bills anymore. The moment I said those words, Brian's face went completely pale, and the family get-together instantly turned into a tense showdown. He had no idea what I'd do next. John, Brian said, swirling an expensive Cabernet in his glass. He was clearly trying to get a reaction out of me. He said that retirement must be a nice life with no pressure, no deadlines, and no real responsibilities. I carefully put my fork down. My delicious prime rib was growing cold on the plate. All around the mahogany table, the one I had helped my daughter, Sarah, pick out just last year, crystal candles flickered. Sarah had clearly outdone herself to celebrate Brian's promotion to regional sales manager. I replied that retirement definitely had its moments, watching him take another big gulp of the very wine I'd brought as a congratulatory gift. Brian leaned back in his chair, the one at the head of the table that he now seemed to prefer during our family dinners. He said that he didn't mean any offense, but that my career as an engineer was a decent run, though it was 40 years ago. He went on to say that everything now was digital and fast-paced, and that it took a younger mind to truly find success. Sarah shifted uncomfortably beside me. The bracelet I'd given her last Christmas caught the candlelight. She spoke up, telling Brian that her father had a wonderful career and that he had designed infrastructure that was still in use. Brian simply waved his hand dismissively. He insisted that we be honest about the situation, asking me when I had last actually built something or accomplished anything significant. My 9-year-old granddaughter, Mia, looked up from her chicken and told her father that I had built her a treehouse last summer. Brian patted her on the head in a condescending way. He replied that it was sweet, but that I needed to understand that real men provided for their families through their own hard work. He said that not everyone could just cruise through retirement while others did all the heavy lifting. The silence that followed was extremely awkward. Sarah nervously laughed and tried to change the subject. She told Mia to tell me about her piano recital, but Brian wasn't done talking. The promotion, combined with the wine, had inflated his ego, making him feel bold. He said he had been thinking that since he was making 6 figures now, it might be time for everyone to start pulling their own weight. I knew exactly what he was alluding to. For 15 years, I had helped with their mortgage, school tuition, car payments, and medical bills. For 15 years, I had watched him spend money like it was water while I silently covered the shortfalls. He went on, pointing at Sarah, saying that she had been out of the workforce for so long, essentially living off what he called family charity. He suggested that it was time for her to rejoin the real world. Sarah's face went pale. Like me, she knew that their extravagant lifestyle was completely dependent on my quiet support. The private school uniforms hanging in the mudroom, the lease on Brian's BMW, the kitchen renovation they'd completed last fall. All of it would have been impossible without my help. My 12-year-old grandson, Leo, sensed the rising tension. He asked his dad if they were in trouble. Brian reassured him that they weren't, but insisted that it was important to understand the difference between earners and dependents, between providers and those who had given up trying. He looked right at me, and his insult hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. The children all exchanged worried glances. Brian, thinking my silence meant that he was winning, leaned forward. He said that he didn't mean to be harsh, but that someone needed to ask the tough questions. He asked when I had last contributed something meaningful and when I had last felt the satisfaction of earning my own way instead of just existing. He paused for effect, savoring what he believed was his moment of superiority. He then asked how it felt to be a failure. The question felt like a physical blow. Sarah gasped. Leo's fork clattered against his plate. Mia began to cry, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I slowly took a sip of my water, set the glass down precisely, and looked directly into Brian's eyes. I said that I'd let him know that the feeling he wanted me to have was the feeling of knowing that this failure would no longer be paying his bills. The color drained from Brian's face faster than wine from a broken bottle. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. The children stared in confusion as their father's triumphant expression crumbled into panic. I continued eating my dinner, cutting each piece of meat with deliberate care, while the table sat in stunned silence. Outside, darkness was settling over the neighborhood, and I could hear a neighbor's dog barking in the distance. After what felt like an eternity, I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin, stood up, and kissed Mia and Leo goodbye. I told Sarah that dinner was delicious and thanked her for it. I walked to the front door, grabbed my coat from the closet, and stepped into the cool March evening, leaving a table full of people who were beginning to understand the true meaning of my 15 years of quiet generosity. The 15-minute drive home passed in silence. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, despite the storm brewing inside of me. I pulled into my driveway, and the motion sensor light cast long shadows across the front steps. Inside, I hung my coat in the hall closet and walked directly to my study. The room smelled of old paper and furniture polish. I turned on the brass desk lamp, and its warm glow illuminated 15 years of meticulously organized filing cabinets. As a retired engineer, I had kept every receipt, every bank statement, and every canceled check. It was time to see exactly what my failure had cost me. I opened the first drawer, labeled 2009 to 2012. The folders were color-coded: blue for mortgage assistance, green for auto loans, yellow for school expenses, and red for medical bills. My wife, Eleanor, had died in late 2008, and by January 2009, Sarah was already struggling. The first mortgage payment assistance was for $2,800. In February, it was another $2,800. In March, it was the same. I spread the statements across my mahogany desk, the numbers forming neat columns under the lamplight. It was $2,800 every month for 180 months. My calculator showed a total of $504,000 in mortgage assistance alone. Next came the car payments. Brian's BMW lease and Sarah's SUV loan totaled $200 monthly for 8 years. That was another $115,200. The numbers steadily climbed. Each folder revealed another layer of generosity that I had forgotten about. Receipts for private school tuition filled an entire drawer. That was for Leo's education from kindergarten through 7th grade and Mia's from preschool through 4th. I had paid for everything: elite schools with swimming pools and foreign language programs. The tuition was $24,000 annually, sometimes more for summer camps and other extracurriculars. 16 years of education expenses came out to $192,000. I also paid for medical insurance premiums when Brian was between jobs, dental work for the children, emergency room visits, and Sarah's therapy sessions after the divorce scare from 3 years ago. Each manila envelope contained hundreds of co-payment receipts, insurance forms, and medical bills that I had quietly covered. The total came out to $8,000 yearly for 15 years, which was $120,000. I also found vacation receipts tucked behind the insurance papers. Disney World in 2015, a European cruise in 2018, and ski lodge rentals in Aspen. There were also receipts for Christmas presents, emergency car repairs, and the down payment for Sarah's kitchen renovation. All of those came out to another $45,000 in miscellaneous support. The final tally made me sit back in my leather chair. The number was $976,200. I had given them nearly $1 million. For the first time since Eleanor's funeral, I felt the full weight of the promise I had made at her bedside. I remembered whispering to her that she shouldn't worry about Sarah and that I would make sure she was secure. I remembered Sarah's tears at the funeral and her panic about the mortgage that she and Brian couldn't afford on their own. She had been so grateful then, calling weekly to thank me, sending me homemade cookies, and bringing the grandchildren for Sunday visits. I wondered when the gratitude had stopped and when my help had become an expectation rather than an act of appreciation. I pulled out my personal financial statements, the ones that showed my own sacrifices. My smaller retirement account because I had put off investing, the modest 2-bedroom home instead of the lakefront property I had wanted, the 15-year-old truck in my garage while Brian drove luxury vehicles. There were also the travel brochures I had collected but never used because Sarah always needed something, the hobbies I had abandoned, and the woman from church who had stopped asking me to dinner because I was always helping my family. I had given them 15 years of my own dreams. At 10:30 p.m., I reached for my phone and looked through my bank contact list. I knew that tomorrow would bring interesting conversations with automatic payment departments. The next morning, my coffee tasted different somehow. It was stronger. I sat at my kitchen table, watching sparrows fight over crumbs outside the window, then returned to my study, where neat stacks of documents waited like soldiers ready for deployment. First National Bank answered on the third ring. A woman named Jennifer said she worked in account services and asked how she could help me. I told her that I needed to cancel the automatic payments from my checking account. My voice had the same steady tone I had used for 40 years of engineering presentations. She asked for the last 4 digits of my social security number for verification. The process took 12 minutes. Jennifer was thorough and professional, and she was completely unaware that she was dismantling 15 years of financial support with each keystroke. She told me that the payments were now discontinued. She asked me if there was anything else she could help me with. I told her that was all and thanked her. I placed a check mark next to the mortgage assistance, $2,800 per month, on my list. Colorado Mountain Insurance required a supervisor. The cancellation of the BMW lease payment required 3 transfers. Each call followed the same pattern: polite verification, efficient processing, and confirmation numbers that I dutifully recorded in my notebook. By 11:15 a.m., I had crossed off 8 items from my list. At 11:47 a.m., the phone rang. It was Sarah, and her voice was filled with confusion rather than panic. She said that something weird had happened with their mortgage payment and that the bank had called, saying there were insufficient funds in the account. She said that it didn't make sense because she had assumed I would keep paying forever. A long silence stretched between us like a taut wire. She asked me what I meant, and her voice climbed half an octave. I told her exactly what I had said last night. I was no longer covering their expenses. She protested, saying that I couldn't just stop paying for their mortgage, insurance, and Leo school. I told her that all of those payments had been discontinued as of that morning. I could hear her breathing quicken. She said that it wasn't funny and that they would lose the house. I simply replied that in that case, they would need to figure out how to pay for it themselves. The line went dead. My notebook showed 6 more calls to make. The utility companies were surprisingly efficient. Centura Academy's accounting department asked fewer questions than I had expected. Each confirmation number went into my log with mechanical precision. Sarah called back at 12:23 p.m. Her voice was now tight with genuine fear. She asked me to please help her and said that she didn't understand what was happening. She told me that the school, the insurance company, and even the electric company had all called, saying that their payments had been declined. I told her that I had canceled the automatic transfers from my accounts. "Your accounts?" she whispered. I asked her if she thought these payments materialized from thin air. Another silence followed. She said that they had never asked me to do it, to which I replied that they never had to ask because I just did it. She then started to say that they couldn't afford it, but she stopped herself. She said that was the point. At 12:31 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, Brian's voice came through with forced authority. He told me that whatever game I was playing needed to stop right now. I told him that it wasn't a game, it was reality. He said that I couldn't just cut them off without warning and that I had legal obligations and verbal contracts. I asked him to show me the contract where I had agreed to pay his bills forever. His silence lasted longer than Sarah's had. The final call on my list was to my financial advisor. I planned to discuss redirecting those monthly payments into my long-neglected retirement fund the next morning. Outside, the sparrows had found more crumbs. At 1:15 p.m., the familiar sound of Brian's BMW pulling into my driveway broke the afternoon quiet. Through my living room window, I watched him slam the car door with unnecessary force while Sarah emerged from the passenger seat, clutching her purse like a lifeline. They marched up my front walkway with the determined stride of people convinced they held the moral high ground. I opened the door before they could even knock. Brian pushed past me without an invitation. Sarah trailed behind him with red-rimmed eyes. I calmly invited them both inside as they walked past me. Brian positioned himself in the center of my living room like a general claiming territory. He told me that my ridiculous tantrum was over and that I would call those banks immediately and restore every single payment. I replied that I would not. His face flushed crimson. He said that I couldn't just cut them off without warning and that there were legal obligations and verbal contracts. I asked him to show me the contract where I had agreed to pay his bills forever. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling. She asked me to please think about what her mother would want and to remember the promise I had made at her funeral. The mention of Eleanor hit me like a cold wind, but I had expected this tactic. I had promised to help her get stable, and 15 years and nearly $1 million later, she was less stable than when we started. $1 million? Sarah whispered, her voice barely carrying across the room. I walked to my desk and retrieved my calculator and notebook. I told her the exact amount was $976,200, which covered their mortgage assistance, car payments, insurance, school tuition, medical bills, vacations, and emergencies. I asked her if she wanted me to break it down by category. Brian's bluster faltered for 3 seconds. Then he replied that it was impossible and that they had never asked for that much. I told him that they had never asked for anything because they had simply expected it. Sarah sank onto my couch, her face pale. She began to ask about the children, Leo's baseball league, and Mia's dance classes. I told them that those things would continue, but that I would pay for them directly from now on. I told them that no more money would flow through them. Brian snapped, saying that I couldn't divide the family like that and that they were a unit, a team. I told him that teams required mutual respect and asked him when either of them had last thanked me for anything. The question hung unanswered in the afternoon air. Sarah's tears started slowly, then built to the desperate sobs I remembered from her teenage years. She said that she didn't know it was so much and that she thought I wanted to help. She said that she thought it made me happy. I told her that it did until she stopped appreciating it and started demanding it. Brian then began pacing on my carpet like a caged animal. He told me that if I wanted gratitude, I should just have it and then restore the payments. I told him that gratitude didn't work retroactively. His pacing stopped. For the first time since entering my house, he looked genuinely worried rather than merely angry. He asked what I wanted from them. I told him that I wanted them to figure out how to live within their means. I told him that I wanted my grandchildren to see their parents working for what they had instead of expecting handouts. I told him that I wanted to be treated like a father and a grandfather, not an ATM. Sarah looked up through her tears and asked what would happen if they couldn't do it. What would happen if they lost everything? I told her that, in that case, she would learn what failure actually felt like. The silence that followed was so profound even the afternoon shadows seemed to be holding their breath. Brian straightened his shoulders, trying to regain his corporate composure. He said he would see about this, adding that there were lawyers who specialized in elder financial abuse. I found it amusing and told him to please call them. I said that I would be happy to explain how I had been financially abused for 15 years. They left without another word. Brian's BMW roared to life with more aggression than the engine probably appreciated. I stood at my window, watching them disappear down the street, and realized my hands were trembling. Silence filled my house like water flooding a broken dam. I collapsed into my leather armchair, the one Eleanor had given me for our 20th anniversary, and stared at the wedding photo on the mantel. I looked at Sarah's radiant smile, Brian's humble bow tie, and Eleanor's glowing face beside me. That was back in 2007. Back then, Brian worked at a small insurance company, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and called me sir with genuine respect. I remember him telling me during our first private conversation that he wanted me to know that he would take good care of Sarah and that he might not have much then, but he was working hard to build something worthy of my daughter. The humility in his voice had been real, and I had believed him. 2 years later, Eleanor was gone. Cancer had taken her in 4 brutal months, leaving Sarah devastated and Brian scrambling to manage their modest mortgage on his entry-level salary. The 2009 recession had just hit, and his company was laying people off. At Eleanor's funeral, Sarah had collapsed against my chest, saying that she didn't know how they would manage since Brian's job wasn't secure and they had house payments. I had whispered that I would help until they got stable. It was a promise of help, but it wasn't a promise of forever. In those first few years, Brian's gratitude was overwhelming. He would write handwritten thank you notes and make weekend visits to fix my gutters or mow my lawn. Sarah would call twice a week just to check on me, and she would bring the grandchildren over for Sunday dinners. She would tell me with tears in her eyes that I was literally saving their lives, promising to pay me back when things improved. The first mortgage payment was $2,800. Brian had promised it would only be for 6 months, just until he got a promotion. The car loan help was $450 a month, just until they built some equity in the house. Leo's private school tuition was $2,000 monthly, just for kindergarten to give him a strong foundation. Each just until became permanent. Each temporary measure became expected. By 2012, the thank you notes had stopped. Brian's weekend visits became occasional appearances where he would drink my beer and complain about his boss. Sarah's grateful calls became monthly requests for more help. She would ask if I could cover Mia's dance classes since it was only $200 a month, or she would say that the kids needed new computers for school, or that their vacation rental had fallen through and could I help with a different place. The word please disappeared first, then thank you. Finally, even the phrase can you became you need to. By 2018, Brian had stopped acknowledging my contributions completely. At neighborhood barbecues, he would brag about his house renovations, his children's private education, and his successful lifestyle. When neighbors complimented his BMW, he would beam with pride about his smart financial planning. Sarah began defending him over me. When I gently suggested they try managing some expenses independently, she would respond with irritation. She would tell me that I didn't understand modern family dynamics and that Brian was under enormous pressure at work and that the children had established routines. She said that I couldn't just disrupt everything because I was feeling unappreciated. That word hit me like a physical blow. Last Christmas, neither of them acknowledged my support. Brian gave a toast about his hard work providing for the family, and Sarah posted social media photos of their expensive gifts with hashtags about a blessed family success. I had sat in my small living room, looking at their thank you cards from 2009, wondering when gratitude had hardened into entitlement. Now, sitting in the gathering dusk, I finally understood what Eleanor would have wanted. She would have wanted dignity, not endless enabling. She would have wanted respect, not unlimited generosity. Outside, shadows stretched longer across my front yard, and somewhere in the distance, a phone began ringing. 3 days passed like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Monday morning brought the first bank notifications. Sarah called at 9:47 a.m. Her voice was thin with panic. She told me that their mortgage payment had failed and that there was a $75 penalty fee. She said that the bank wanted them to pay $2,875 by tomorrow or they would start foreclosure proceedings. I said nothing. The silence stretched until she hung up. By noon, Brian's BMW lease company had left 2 voicemails about their missed $650 payment. Sarah's SUV loan, another $480 monthly, bounced with a $50 penalty. Their homeowner's insurance lapsed at 3 p.m. when the automatic payment failed. Tuesday brought deeper water. Sarah called again, this time with Brian shouting in the background. She told me with a cracked voice that they couldn't cover everything and that she had applied at Target, Walmart, and 3 restaurants. She said that even if she got hired immediately, they were only offering $12 an hour, which was barely $2,000 a month before taxes. For the first time in 15 years, she was doing the mathematics of their survival. Wednesday afternoon, I drove past Centura Academy during pickup time. Leo and Mia stood with other children whose tuition payments had cleared. The school had called Sarah that morning, demanding that $4,800 was due immediately or the kids would be withdrawn by Friday. That evening, my neighbor, Mrs. Payne, mentioned hearing raised voices from Sarah's house during her walk. She said sadly that it sounded like they were having financial troubles and that the young man was yelling something about maxed-out credit cards. Thursday brought the crescendo. Sarah's third call came at 2:15 p.m. She pleaded with me, saying that she had gone to 5 interviews yesterday at McDonald's, a cleaning company, and a grocery store, but that they all wanted references from recent employers and she hadn't worked since 2009. Her voice had lost its demanding edge, replaced by something I hadn't heard in years: humility. She went on to say that Brian had tried to pay the mortgage yesterday, but that their account only had $3,000. She said that he paid the $2,875, then realized they couldn't cover utilities, groceries, or gas for the cars, and he had to call the bank back and cancel the payment. I remained silent. She said that the BMW lease company had scheduled a repossession for Monday and that they were taking Brian's car unless they paid the $650 plus a $200 reinstatement fee. More silence. She then said with a very small voice that she thought they were going to lose everything. I said quietly that yes, they probably were. She started crying then, deep, painful sobs that reminded me of her teenage heartbreaks. But this wasn't teenage drama. This was adult consequence. Friday morning, I sat in my study reviewing my redirected financial plan. Those monthly payments I had been making would now go toward the European river cruise Eleanor and I had planned before she got sick, the Italian cooking classes, the photography workshop in Scotland. My phone rang at 11:30. It was Brian this time. His voice had none of its previous arrogance. He told me that they needed to talk. I told him that we had already talked. He said that we needed to really talk as adults about how we could fix this situation. I asked if he meant how I could fix his situation. A long pause followed. He then said that yes, that's exactly what he meant. At least he was finally being honest. I told him to come over Sunday afternoon, all of them, and to bring the children. He asked if they should and what they should prepare to discuss. I told him to prepare to discuss reality and hung up. Outside my window, the first spring flowers were beginning to push through the soil. The next Monday morning, my friend Dave from the hardware store called with concern in his voice. He said that he had heard something troubling yesterday and that Brian had been at Murphy's bar telling people that I had cut off my family without warning and that I was forcing the kids out of private school out of spite. I set my coffee cup down slowly. I asked him what exactly Brian had said. He replied that Brian had called it financial abandonment of innocent grandchildren and had used a lot of business terms to make it sound like I was punishing Sarah for something petty. By Tuesday, Sarah had called my late wife's sister, Janet. Janet phoned me that afternoon, her voice tight with disapproval. She said that Sarah had told her I had abandoned them in their time of greatest need and that she was crying. Janet then said that the children didn't understand why Grandpa didn't love them anymore. I asked her if Sarah had mentioned the $976,000 I had given them over 15 years. A long silence followed. She then asked what I had said. I told her it was nearly $1 million: mortgage payments, car loans, insurance, school tuition, medical bills, and vacations every month for 15 years. She said that it couldn't be right. I told her that I had documentation for every penny. The next morning, Mia called me. Her small voice was carefully rehearsed. She asked if I was her grandpa and said that her mommy said they might lose their house because I didn't want to help them anymore. She then asked if they had done something wrong. My heart twisted, but I kept my voice gentle. I told her that she hadn't done anything wrong and asked if she wanted me to pick her up for ice cream that afternoon. She replied that her mommy said that I might say no to everything now. I told her that I would never say no to ice cream with my granddaughter. That afternoon at Dairy Queen, Mia's scripted sadness melted away as she told me about her art project. When I dropped her off, Sarah watched from the window with calculating eyes. Wednesday brought a more direct confrontation. Nancy Morrison, a longtime neighbor, approached me at the grocery store. She said in a voice that carried across 3 aisles that she was ashamed of me for cutting off my own daughter when she needed me most and asked what Eleanor would think. I faced her calmly. I replied that Eleanor would think that 15 years and nearly $1 million was generous enough. Nancy's righteous anger faltered. She then asked if I meant $1 million. I replied that it was $976,200, which covered their mortgage assistance, car payments, school tuition, insurance premiums, medical bills, and vacation expenses. I then asked if she would like to see the bank records. Other shoppers had stopped to listen. Nancy's face turned red. She said that Sarah had never mentioned any of it. I told her that Caroline mentions very little about what she receives, only what she wants. That evening, Dave called again. He said that Brian had been back at Murphy's tonight and had tried the same routine, but that Bill Henderson had been there. I remembered Bill. He was the one who had sold them that BMW 3 years ago. I asked Dave what Bill had said. He replied that Bill had asked how Brian afforded a $60,000 car on his salary, and when Brian started deflecting, Bill mentioned that he remembered me co-signing the lease. Dave said that the whole bar got quiet real fast. Thursday morning brought a call from my old engineering colleague, Tom. He said that he had heard some interesting gossip at the coffee shop and had also heard my side of the story from Dave. He then asked me directly if I had really supported them for 15 years. I told him that it was every month since Eleanor died and that they had never acknowledged it. I also mentioned that last Christmas, Brian had given a toast about his hard work providing for the family, and Sarah had posted photos of their expensive gifts on social media with hashtags about blessed family success. Tom let out a low whistle and said that was cold. Friday evening, I was watering my front garden when Mrs. Payne approached. She said that her daughter had heard something at school pickup today, with parents talking about family drama. She said that some people were questioning the story my son-in-law had been telling. I continued watering my roses and told her that people had a right to their opinions. She also said that people were saying that I had been very generous to those children over the years. I replied that I had been very generous and that I loved my grandchildren. She agreed, saying that that had never been in question. Saturday morning, Sarah called, her voice shrill with desperation. She said that people were asking questions, uncomfortable questions about money, timelines, and documentation, and that I needed to stop spreading lies about them. I replied that I hadn't spread anything and that I had simply answered questions honestly when asked directly. She then said that I was destroying their reputation in this community. I told her that I wasn't destroying anything and that I was just no longer subsidizing the creation of false ones. The line went dead. Sunday arrived with clear skies and the knowledge that by afternoon, we would all be sitting in my living room again. But this time the community would be watching. The family meeting never happened. By Monday morning, reality had other plans. Dave called me at 8:15 a.m. He said that he had seen a foreclosure notice posted on Sarah's front door yesterday evening and that it was a big official thing from the county. I set my coffee down carefully. He said they had 30 days to pay $8,625, which was 3 months of missed mortgage payments plus penalties and legal fees. Tuesday morning brought more changes. Brian's BMW was gone from their driveway, replaced by a 10-year-old Honda Civic. Mrs. Payne mentioned seeing Brian at the Honda dealership looking defeated while Sarah filled out paperwork. She observed that the monthly savings must be significant and that the BMW lease was probably costing them nearly $1,000 a month. Wednesday afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store and saw Sarah behind the checkout counter. She wore a blue vest with a name tag, scanning items with mechanical precision. When Mrs. Patterson approached her lane, Sarah's face flushed deep red. Mrs. Patterson said that she hadn't known Sarah was working there. Sarah replied that she had started on Monday and then asked, "Paper or plastic?" without meeting her eyes. Her shift ended at 6 p.m. I watched through the window as she walked to the old Honda. Her shoulders were slumped with exhaustion. That evening, Leo called me. He said that his mom and dad were fighting again and that it was really loud this time. I asked him what they were fighting about. He said it was about money. He said that his dad said his mom's job didn't pay enough to matter, and that his mom said his dad had never made enough either. He said that they then said mean things about me. I asked him what kind of mean things. He replied that they had said that I had ruined everything on purpose. But then he said his mom started crying and said maybe they had ruined it themselves. Thursday morning brought the sound of raised voices from their house during my morning walk. Through the thin walls, I caught fragments of their argument. I heard Sarah say something about being on her feet for 8 hours for peanuts and that they had never appreciated what they had. I also heard Brian say that her pride had gotten them into this mess. He then mentioned 15 years of handouts. The arguing stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of a door slamming and Brian's Honda starting up. That afternoon, Mia visited me. Her usual cheerfulness was replaced by worry. I settled her at my kitchen table with cookies and milk. I asked her what felt different. She said that her mom was always tired and sad, and that her dad got angry about everything. She said that they talked about losing their house and that Leo had heard them say they might have to change schools. I asked her how she felt about that. She said that she was scared, but then hesitated. She said that she also felt like maybe they should have said, "Thank you," more. Out of the mouths of babes. Friday evening, I was reading in my study when my doorbell rang. Brian stood on my porch alone, his corporate confidence completely absent. His usual pressed shirt was wrinkled, his tie was loosened, and his face showed an exhaustion I had never seen before. He told me that he needed to talk to me. Just the two of us, man to man. I invited him into my living room, the same room where he had demanded I restore payments just 2 weeks ago. He sat heavily in the chair, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. He told me that the foreclosure was real and that they had 30 days. He said that Sarah was working 40 hours a week for $13.50 an hour, and that after taxes, that was maybe $1,100 a month. He said that he was bringing home about $5,800 monthly, and that the mortgage alone was $2,875. He looked up at me with something approaching humility. He said they couldn't make it work. Not even close. He said that they never could without me. I said quietly that no, they never could. He said that he had been thinking about something I had said about earning respect versus inheriting it. His voice cracked slightly. He said that he had never earned anything. The house, the cars, the kids' schools, and that none of it was really his. I asked what he wanted from me. He replied that he wanted to know if there was a way back from this. Not back to how things were, he said, but forward to something better. Outside, the streetlights were beginning to flicker on as darkness settled over our suburban neighborhood. Saturday afternoon, I was organizing my financial documents when the doorbell rang. Sarah stood on my porch in her blue grocery store vest, her face streaked with tears and exhaustion. She pleaded with me, saying that they needed to talk about Leo and Mia. She looked different, smaller somehow. The entitled confidence I had watched grow over 15 years had crumbled, leaving behind the frightened daughter I remembered from Eleanor's funeral. I invited her into the living room. She collapsed into the same chair where Brian had sat the night before, her hands shaking as she pulled off her work name tag. She whispered that they had 4 days until the foreclosure was completed. She said that Leo kept asking if they were really going to lose the house and that Mia had nightmares last night about moving to a strange place. I asked her what she wanted from me. She replied that she wanted her children to have stability and to finish the school year with their friends. She said that she wanted Mia to sleep through the night without crying about leaving her bedroom. She looked up at me with eyes that held no trace of manipulation, only raw maternal desperation. She said that she had been working 40 hours a week on her feet, scanning groceries for people who used to be her friends. She said that yesterday, Mrs. Henderson came through her line and asked why she was working there, and that she had wanted to crawl under the counter and disappear, but she didn't. I smiled and asked paper or plastic because, as she said, she finally understood what work meant, what earning meant, and what I had been trying to teach them. She wiped her nose with a tissue from her purse. She said that Brian had told her about my conversation with him last night and that he had said I had asked if there was a way forward. I replied that there might be, but that it would require significant changes from both of them. She told me to tell her what to do. I leaned forward in my chair. I told her that I would pay Leo and Mia's school tuition directly to Centura Academy. I said that I would cover their clothing, medical expenses, sports activities, and music lessons. I also told her that I would establish college funds for both of them. Sarah's face brightened with the first hope I had seen in weeks. But I continued by saying that I would not pay their mortgage, car payments, insurance, or any of their adult lifestyle expenses. I told them that they and Brian would live within their actual means. Period. She replied that they could do that and that they would downsize and find a smaller place. I told her that there was more. I said that I wanted public acknowledgment of the 15 years and $976,000 I had provided. I said that I wanted sincere public apologies for the disrespect and entitlement. I said that I wanted genuine gratitude, not just when they needed something. Sarah's face crumpled. She said that Brian would never agree to public apologies because of his pride. I told her that in that case, His pride was more important than his children's stability. We sat in silence while she processed this reality. She asked what kind of public acknowledgement I wanted. I told her that I wanted a letter to the community newspaper explaining how I had supported their family and thanking me for my generosity. I also said that I wanted an honest Facebook post about 15 years of financial help and face-to-face apologies to the people they had lied to over the past 2 weeks. I said that if they did all of this, their children would have educational security and their grandfather's love. I also said that they would have a relationship with me based on honesty and mutual respect, but they would also have a lifestyle limited by what she and Brian actually earned. Sarah covered her face with her hands. She said that she didn't know if she could convince him. I told her that she had 48 hours to decide. After that, I said the offer would expire. She stood slowly, her grocery vest wrinkled from the long day. At the door, she turned back and thanked me for still caring about Leo and Mia. I told her that I had never stopped caring about any of them, but that I had just stopped enabling her. After she drove away in the old Honda, I sat in my living room watching the evening news. Somewhere across town, a very difficult conversation was about to begin. Sarah's Honda pulled into their driveway at 5:30 p.m. Through my neighbor Dave's later account, I learned how the evening unfolded. Sheldon was heating leftover pizza when Caroline entered the kitchen, still wearing her grocery vest. He looked up from the microwave, noting her red-rimmed eyes and exhausted posture. "Where have you been? Your shift ended at 3. "I went to see Dad." The microwave beeped in the silence that followed. Sheldon pulled out the steaming pizza, set it on the counter, and turned to face his wife fully. "You went behind my back after everything we discussed about handling this together. We're out of time, Sheldon. For days until foreclosure. The children are terrified. I had to try something." Caroline sank into a kitchen chair, pulling off her name tag with trembling fingers. "He's willing to help, but there are conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "He'll pay for Tommy and Emma's school, clothes, activities, medical expenses. He'll set up college funds for both of them." Sheldon's face brightened. "That's fantastic. When does he restart the mortgage payments?" "He doesn't. We have to live on what we actually earn." The brightness faded instantly. "That's impossible. You know our expenses." "He wants something else, too?" Caroline's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Public apologies. Acknowledgement of the 15 years and $976,000 he supported us." Sheldon's face went white then red. "He wants me to humiliate myself publicly? Admit I've been what? A charity case?" "Sheldon, he spent nearly $1 million on us." $1 million? Do you understand what that means? It means he chose to help family. That's what fathers do." Caroline stood up slowly, her grocery vest wrinkled and stained. "No, that's what saints do. And we treated him like an ATM." From upstairs came the sound of Tommy's voice calling down, "Mom, Dad, why are you yelling?" Both parents stopped, realizing their voices had risen. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Are you fighting about Grandpa again?" Caroline climbed the stairs to comfort her daughter while Sheldon paced the kitchen, his hands clenched into fists. When Caroline returned 20 minutes later, she found him staring at the foreclosure notice on the counter. "I won't do it," he said without looking up. "I won't stand in front of our neighbors and admit I'm a failure who couldn't provide for his own family." "Then what's your solution? Where are we going to live? Where will the children go to school?" "We'll figure something out. Get a loan. File for bankruptcy. Something. Anything but crawling to your father and begging forgiveness for imaginary sins." Caroline pulled out her phone and opened the calculator app. "Okay, let's figure it out. Our combined monthly income is $6,900. The mortgage is $2,875. That leaves $4,025 for everything else." She continued typing numbers. Car payment for the Honda $350. Insurance $250. Utilities $300. Groceries $600. Gas $200. That's $1,600, leaving us $2,625. See, we can make it work. I haven't added the children's expenses yet. Tommy's baseball league, $120 monthly. Emma's dance classes, $80. Both kids' school supplies, clothes, medical copays, birthday parties, Christmas gifts. Caroline's voice cracked. Sheldon, we can't afford our children. Through the thin walls, Tommy's voice drifted down again. Mom, Emma's crying. She says we're going to be homeless. Caroline looked at her husband with eyes that held no trace of the entitled woman who had demanded her father restore their payments 2 weeks ago. We have 36 hours to decide. Dad's offer expires Monday at noon. She walked upstairs to comfort her children, leaving Sheldon alone in the kitchen with the foreclosure notice and a calculator that couldn't make their impossible mathematics work. Monday morning at 10:15, the Honda pulled into my driveway, carrying all 4 of them. Through my front window, I watched Sheldon emerge from the passenger seat with the defeated posture of a man who'd spent the night staring at ceilings. Caroline knocked on my door, flanked by Tommy and Emma in their school clothes. Sheldon stood behind them, his business shirt wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Dad, we need to accept your offer. All of it. I invited them into my living room. The children settled on my couch while Caroline took the same chair she'd occupied Saturday. Sheldon remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back like a defendant awaiting sentencing. The bank called this morning, Caroline continued. Foreclosure completes at 3 p.m. unless we pay $8,625. We don't have it. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Grandpa, are we really going to lose our house? Not if I can help it, sweetheart. Sheldon cleared his throat. Mark, I need to say some things. He walked to my mantel, studying the wedding photo of Martha and me, then turned to face his family. 15 years ago, you offered to help us temporarily. I took that help and turned it into a permanent arrangement without ever acknowledging what you were sacrificing. His voice cracked slightly. I told people the house renovations were from my success at work. I bragged about the cars like I'd earned them. I let Tommy and Emma think their grandfather was just being nice instead of being their actual provider. Caroline reached over and took Emma's hand. Dad, I owe you apologies too. I took your generosity and treated it like inheritance, like something I deserved instead of something you chose to give. You paid our mortgage for 15 years, Sheldon added. $504,000. You paid our car loans, insurance, school tuition, medical bills, vacations, Christmas gifts, birthday parties, dance classes, baseball leagues. Tommy looked up with wide eyes. Grandpa paid for my baseball. Grandpa paid for everything, Caroline said quietly. Almost $1 million over 15 years. Emma's small voice cut through the heavy air. Why didn't you tell us? Caroline's face reddened. Because we were ashamed. Not of Grandpa's help, but of how we acted like we didn't need it. I leaned forward in my chair. If I help you keep the house today, things will be different. I'll pay Tommy and Emma's school tuition directly to Centura Academy. I'll cover their medical expenses, clothing, activities, and college funds, but I won't pay your mortgage, car payments, or any adult lifestyle expenses. You'll live on what you actually earn. Sheldon nodded slowly. We understand. There's more. I want public acknowledgement. A letter to the community newspaper thanking me for 15 years of support. Social media posts expressing genuine gratitude. Face-to-face apologies to the neighbors you've lied to. When? Caroline asked. This week before Saturday. Sheldon's jaw tightened, but he nodded again. What else? Monthly family dinners here. Not to report your finances, but to maintain proper relationships. To remember that family means respect, not entitlement. I stood and walked to my desk, pulling out my checkbook. I'm going to call First National and arrange an emergency payment. But this is the last mortgage payment I ever make for you. After today, you sink or swim on your own income. As I dialed the bank, I heard Emma whisper to her mother, Are we going to be okay now? Caroline's voice was soft, but certain. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine. For the first time in 15 years, I believe she was right. 3 months later, on the third Saturday of June, they arrived for our monthly family meeting at exactly 2 p.m. Caroline had been promoted to shift supervisor at the grocery store, earning $15.50 an hour. Sheldon had learned to balance their budget without expecting miracles. Grandpa, Emma bounded through my front door in her soccer uniform, grass stains on her knees, and a medal around her neck. Look what I won at the tournament. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me about the winning goal. While Emma retailed me with athletic heroics, Tommy showed me his report card, straight A's, and a note from his teacher, praising his improved attitude and confidence. Caroline set a manila folder on my coffee table. Dad, here's this month's budget review. We're covering the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and car payment entirely from our combined salaries. We even started a small emergency fund. Sheldon, who 3 months ago couldn't look me in the eye, now contributed to our discussions with genuine respect. Mark, I wanted to ask your advice about a potential promotion opportunity at work. The regional director position might open up next quarter. What would it involve? More responsibility, better salary, but also travel. I wanted to make sure Caroline and I could handle the children's schedules if I'm away occasionally. I opened my own folder organized with typical engineer precision. Tommy's soccer league fee, paid directly to Colorado Youth Sports. Emma's piano lessons handled through Mountain Music Academy. Both children's dental checkups are scheduled for next month, covered under my family plan. Caroline smiled, a genuine expression I hadn't seen in years. Dad, I can't thank you enough for keeping their lives stable while we figured out how to be actual adults. Speaking of being adults, Sheldon added, we completed the community service hours Judge Martinez assigned after our public apology letters. Volunteering at the food bank was enlightening. We met families genuinely struggling, not just living beyond their means like we were. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Grandpa, can we show you the thank you cards we made? Both children produced construction paper cards decorated with glitter and heartfelt messages. Tommy's read, thank you for taking care of us, even when Mom and Dad forgot to say please. Emma's was simpler. I love you, Grandpa. You're the best. These weren't coached expressions or guilt-driven apologies. These were the authentic words of children who finally understood what love and security actually meant. There's something else, Caroline said quietly. Sheldon and I have been talking about eventually buying a smaller house, something we can actually afford on our own income. Not immediately, but maybe in 2 years when we've built more savings. That sounds like good planning, Sheldon nodded. We want to prove we can stand on our own feet, not because we don't appreciate your help with the kids, but because we need to respect what you've already given us. As the afternoon wound down, Tommy asked the question that summarized everything. Grandpa, are you proud of us now? I looked around my living room at my daughter, who had learned the value of work, my son-in-law, who had swallowed his pride for his children's sake, and my grandchildren, who finally understood gratitude. Yes, Tommy, I'm very proud of all of you. They left as the sun was setting, Emma's hand in mine as I walked them to their car, the same Honda that had replaced the BMW. But somehow it looked less like a downgrade and more like a choice made with wisdom. Watching their tail lights disappear down my street, I realized Martha would have been proud, too. Not of the money I'd spent, or the control I'd finally asserted, but of the family we'd become when respect replaced entitlement and love replaced exploitation. The revenge I'd sought wasn't punishment. It was transformation, and sometimes that's the sweetest justice of all.